I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
Prestige Living Podcast. So with that, who do you want to be?
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Prestige Living. This is Jay O'Brien with another segment of Be Bold. It's been some time. I know, a couple weeks off. I'm back. And today's going to be a little longer. Excuse me while I spit out my gum. Oh, man, I made it. So today I want to go over a story that happened roughly 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half or so. And basically, it's just about always doing the right thing, whether it is in business or life in general, relationship, love, life, anything, doesn't matter. If you believe in karma or God or the universe, it doesn't really matter. But I think everyone sort of has a general understanding and a general agreement that what goes around comes around. And a big part of being a business owner is making difficult decisions and sticking to them, doing things that are often uncomfortable, things that often will lose money just because it's the right thing to do. And there's a story that I wanted to go over today that I hope you'll enjoy. Roughly 2 years ago, and by the way, none of this is written down. I'm just jiving here, so hopefully you'll stick with me and listen to it as I go. But roughly 2 years ago, I received a phone call from my cousin who was a private client banker at the time, and one of his clients who had come in owned two homes, one in Eastside Costa Mesa and one in Corona Del Mar. And the one in Corona Del Mar was not being occupied by her. She had a tenant in there who was supposedly a good friend of hers, a man who was a contractor and lived there for 5 years, rent-free. And that was not part of the agreement at all. In fact, he was supposed to be paying rent, but never did. 5 years went by. And throughout this time, at this point, 2 years ago, she was an elderly woman and he was maybe middle-aged, and sold her on the idea of, let's tear down this house, very, very desirable community in Corona Del Mar, and let's rebuild it. And, you know, I'm going to charge you for every labor dollar and every material. But when it's all done, I want X percent of equity in the home because I did all the work. And she was tricked into thinking this was a good idea, ran it by my cousin at the time, and that's when I received the phone call. To which he just said, hey, look, you should give this woman a call. I think she's being taken advantage of. I think she doesn't really quite know, you know, what's going on, and I don't really trust this guy that's talking to her on the other end. So I gave her a call. Her name was Marlene. And the first time I met with her was for a casual conversation at her home in Eastside Costa Mesa. And I remember vividly approaching the home, and the screen was shut, the front door was open, and I could hear country music playing from inside, and she was making coffee. And I met her face to face, and we sat down, and she reminded me a lot of my grandmother. And anyway, it's not really my style to go right into business or anything like that. It's good to get to know people as human beings and not just for dollars and cents and to complete a transaction, so to speak. And we got to talking, and I could tell that she really enjoyed the company, that she probably doesn't get a lot of visitors. She is not married. She has no kids. She is in her 80s. And near the end of the conversation, she brought this up. And I knew it was sensitive because this contractor, quote, friend of hers, really she valued and thought he was a good friend of hers. And he did all the work in her house in Eastside Costa Mesa, and she spoke very highly of him. So I had to be very careful with my words, but essentially told her, you know, I don't really quite understand why he'd be entitled to equity of the home if you're the one who's paying for all this work to be done and you're the one taking the risk. So it was a constant push and pull, and we met almost every week for coffee at her house just to start, I guess, a relationship and speaking with one another about anything and everything. I can recall driving her to the house in Corona Del Mar and looking at that, going by old restaurants that she spoke of that she used to visit, and being at her house listening to this country music as she served me muffins and coffee. And pretty soon, Marlene got sick. and she didn't have anyone to take care of her, and eventually had to get a stent put in her heart, and didn't have a ride to go to Cedars-Sinai. So I had offered to go grocery shopping for her, to take her to the hospital, do really whatever you had to do, because that's just what you do. When someone's in need of help, you help them. Pretty soon after her visit to the hospital Cedars, she came back, and our weekly coffee meetings continued until one day when I came to the house, and although she always anticipated my arrival by having the front door open and the music playing, both doors were shut. And I remember thinking that this wasn't good, and sat there for quite a long time until eventually she slowly came to the door and didn't look very good. And I had caught up with her. She basically said that she had been feeling pretty badly for the last few days. She looked very ill. She looked weak. She hadn't been eating, and the house was a mess. I laid her down and had her rest. She took her medicine that she showed me was on the counter. I offered to get her food and took care of her dog, took her dog on a walk, cleaned the house, even certain areas where maybe were, this is a little too graphic, but graphic areas that needed to be cleaned, I should say, and took care of that. And pretty soon, Marlene and I had a friendship, and that took over everything else, as I try and do that with most people in my life, clients or otherwise. And soon Marlene had to go back to the hospital, and things sort of went from bad to worse. And she had continually talked about selling this home in Corona Del Mar. And there are times where she told me how much money she wanted to get for it, and I had told her that it's not worth that, in so many words. And we had just gone back and forth, but I never pushed it too hard because I could tell that wasn't really the basis of our conversation, and it wasn't really why I was there, although that might have been how things started. My reason for being there, I felt, was significantly more important than that as time went on. And once Marlene went to the hospital, our weekly coffee meetings ended up being more like daily or every other day meetings that had nothing to do with business, just me bringing her donuts and talking with her in the hospital. And soon I was the one next to her when we were filling out her advanced healthcare directive, and when she was very scared, all the way to the point where she slipped into a coma. And about 6 days after she slipped into a coma, she came to. I was called back to the hospital. I met with her, and the doctors had evaluated her and said she's definitely in her right state of mind. She's okay. And she told me, I want to sell that home in Corona Del Mar. Let's do this. I simply did not feel comfortable bringing a listing agreement into a hospital like that. It was a very interesting situation, and a difficult one at that. And I had spoken with her neighbor at the time, who was inevitably going to be the one to handle her entire estate, and express my concerns. And that just Marlene wanted to get a certain number for her home. It was a number I didn't feel the home was worth. And really, normally I would illustrate for an hour or so as to why I want to do what I'm doing and why you're going to hire me. And it wouldn't just be hey, I have to do this and sign here and let's go. So needless to say, I spent the last few days with Marlene in the hospital, and then received a phone call that she had passed away. And then about 6-7 months later, I received a call from the neighbor who was handling the estate. They had been advised by their attorney to reach out to multiple agents. And the home was, Marlene wanted to sell the home for $2.5 million. And I had told them that the property wasn't worth that. They asked me to give them a valuation, and that they were going to do a formal appraisal and compare the two opinions against each other. It's a very, very difficult home to place value on, as it was extremely unique for the area, very rundown. And I had valued it at $2 million. The appraisal came in at 1.9. Marlene always wanted to sell for 2.5. So at the surface, we had the person handling the estate as well as the next of kin in the family say that they did not want to go to the market. They didn't want to list the property. They just wanted to sell it directly to a buyer. And if I had a buyer, to let them know. Well, I did. I had a buyer, all cash, ready to go, 10-day close, willing to pay $2 million, $100,000 above the appraised value. And this is the part that I want everyone to take note of. Everyone thinks in the real estate industry that that's a benefit to the seller. It is absolutely 100% not a benefit. People will sell you on, oh, that way you don't have people coming through your house. That way you don't have to worry about this, worry about that. But what you do have to worry about is probably getting way less money because you went to the first person rather than marketing it out. If there's a demand for the home and person number one's willing to pay X for it, you better believe there's plenty of buyers lined up willing to pay X as well, and maybe even Y, the higher amount, right? So in this case, I told them, hey, I do have the buyer. He will pay $2 million, and it will be all cash. It'll be the easiest transaction ever. But listen to me when I say it's not in the best benefit of you or the estate or what Marlene would have wanted, and here's why. And I went into detail about what I just described. And after doing so, they agreed to list the property with me on the MLS. This advice that I had given, this equates to a $50,000 loss of income for me personally. All I would have had to do is say, yep, you want to do it off market? Let's do it. I got the guy, gonna buy it for $100,000 above appraised value. Everyone wins. But in reality, the only person who would have really won would have been me. And I would have walked away with an additional $50,000 just from taking the order that the client thought that they wanted. So that's what that advice cost me. That's point number one. Point number two is as things went on and we solicited multiple offers, we received 13. We eventually sold the property for $2.5 million, exactly the number Marlene wanted because we were able to leverage the demand and negotiate and get the price up that much. That buyer who purchased at $2.5 million was not a buyer of mine, hence the $50,000 loss. And during that time, I remember the day we were closing escrow, receiving a call from the person handling the estate and said, hey, I'm here with escrow and I think that there is a problem with the commission. I think that the number is wrong. Well, anytime you receive a call like that, it can be kind of concerning. But the concern on her side was that the commission was not enough. She had misunderstood and thought that we had agreed to a higher number rather than a lower number. It was a dual variable rate commission arrangement, so it was I guess easy to confuse that. Long story short, after this 5-10 minute conversation, I had someone on the other end literally telling me that the number that we had agreed to was 1% higher than what we actually agreed to. And in that moment, again, all I would have had to say is, oh yeah, okay, you're right, or led her to believe that she was correct, when in fact I knew 100% that she was incorrect and that we had something in writing specifying what I knew was correct. Again, that piece of advice or that clarification cost me in itself $25,000. So the point of this Be Bold is just things in life are difficult and decisions often need to be made that are hard to make, and it's easy to put our own self-interest over the interest of other people, especially when money is involved. And this is just a clear, real-life, living in-person example of a $75,000 loss from doing the right thing. And so I can't stress it enough. You might talk about little things here and there. This is a pretty significant amount of money. And at the end of the day, you're only as good as your ethics and your morals and what your actions are over your words. And when someone can trust you and actually does put 100% of their trust in you, there is no better compliment in the entire world. So if you've stuck with me throughout this whole Be Bold, I sincerely appreciate it. I promise to get more out. Have an amazing day and be bold.
If you would like to be on the Prestige Living podcast or know someone that would be a great guest, go to www.prestigelivingpodcast.com. We'd love to hear your story.